Chapter 9. The Bismark had been traveling for several days towards the sixth planet, Rizzo carefully examining the visiplates and instrument board before rejoining the others. "Still discussing those humanoid fish, Dotty Dimple?" he asked, puffing on his pipe. "They're a peculiar tribe of porpoises, but I have a soft spot for them. In fact, they're more like us than many humans we know." "I adore them," replied Margaret. "Their size is impressive." "Terrible, Dick, just terrible!" exclaimed Dorothy. "I can't tolerate such jokes, but really I think they're wonderful, despite their unusual appearance. Mrs. Carfon is simply delightful, even if she resembles a walrus, and their baby seal is too cute for words, and that boy Seven is incredibly intelligent." "He should be," dryly remarked Crane. "He's probably as intelligent as any of us." "Do you really think so?" asked Margaret. "He acted like a typical boy, but he did seem to understand things exceptionally well." "They likely are," Rizzo chimed in. "They're ahead of us in most things, and as for their baldness, our two little female friends' impressive hair probably seems barbaric to them, much like how we view the hairy hide of a Neanderthal man." "That may be true," replied Dorothy nonchalantly, "but we're not planning on living there, so why worry? I like them, and I believe they like us." "They certainly acted that way," agreed Margaret. "But say, Mart, if that planet is so old that all their land has eroded away, how do they still have so much water? And their atmosphere is quite substantial too." "The air pressure," explained Crane, "while greater than on Earth, was probably around 3 meters of mercury originally. As for the erosion, they may have had more water to begin with than Earth did." "That makes sense," said Dorothy. "But there's one thing I've been wondering. Everywhere we've been, except for that one planet Dick thinks is a wandering planet, we've encountered intelligent life that is remarkably similar to humans." "How do we explain it?" challenged Rizzo. Crane pondered the question silently for some time before Rizzo continued. "I'll answer it myself by asking another. Why not? Why couldn't there be other intelligent life out there? After all, we consider ourselves the highest form of life on Earth, but there could be other planets with similar conditions to ours that produce similar results. What do you think, Crane?" "It's possible," conceded Crane, "but it's not necessarily universally true." "Of course not," agreed Rizzo. "We could find all kinds of intelligent life on planets with vastly different conditions than ours, but the Fenachrone world is different, and they're more or less human. They're bipeds with recognizable features. Their world has so much more mass than ours that their gravitation is simply frightening." "That much difference is relatively slight," argued Dorothy. "I mean, it's not a fundamental difference, but I see what you're saying, Rizzo. The atmosphere and temperature of a planet have a lot to do with evolution, and the mass of the planet is a distant third." "You may be right," conceded Crane, "but I think you're arguing from insufficient evidence." "I am," admitted Rizzo. "We don't have much to go on. But remember that planet we stumbled upon on our first trip? The one with an atmosphere composed mostly of gaseous chlorine? We assumed that life there was impossible, but we didn't stop to investigate. If we go back there, protected by our rays and equipment, I wouldn't be surprised to find life there. And I have a hunch that it would be a form of life that would make your grandfather's whiskers curl up into a ball." "You have the strangest ideas, Rizzo," protested Dorothy. "I hope you're not planning on exploring that planet just to prove your point." "I never thought of it before," admitted Rizzo, "and we're too busy dealing with the Fenachrone mess to even consider it now. But someday we'll have to go back and investigate. Right, Crane?" "As science demands it," I said, insisting on dematerializing us. "By all means, we should be in a position to make contributions to science in fields as yet untouched. Most assuredly, we shall investigate those points." "Then they'll go alone, won't they, Peggy?" asked my companion. "Absolutely. We've seen some pretty middling horrible things already, and if these two men of ours call the frightful things we have seen normal, and are planning on deliberately hunting up things that even they will consider monstrous, you and I most certainly shall stay at home." "Yeah? You say it easy. Bounce back, Peg, you've struck a rubber fence. Rufus, you red-headed little fraud, you know you wouldn't let me go to the corner store after a can of tobacco without insisting on tagging along." "You're a—" began Dorothy hotly, but broke off in amazement and gasped, "For heaven's sake, what was that?" "What was what?" "It missed me. It went right through you. It was a kind of funny little cloud, like smoke or something. It came right through the ceiling like a flash, went right through you and on down through the floor. There it comes back again. Before their staring eyes, a vague, nebulous something moved rapidly upward through the floor and passed upward through the ceiling. Dorothy leapt to my side, and I put my arm around her reassuringly. "'S all right, folks. I know what that thing is." "Well, shoot it, quick," Dorothy implored. "It's one of those projections from where we're heading for, trying to get our range, and it's the most welcome sight these weary old eyes have rested upon for full many a long and dreary moon. They've probably located us from our power plant rays. We're an awful long ways off yet, though, and going like a streak of greased lightning, so they're having trouble in holding us. They're friendly, we already know that. They probably want to talk to us. It'd make it easier for them if we'd shut off our power and drift at constant velocity, but we'd use up valuable time and throw our calculations all out of whack. We'll let them try to match our acceleration. If they can do that, they're good." The apparition reappeared, oscillating back and forth irregularly, passing through the arena walls, through the furniture and the instrument boards, and even through the mighty power plant itself, as though nothing was there. Eventually, however, it remained stationary a foot or so above the floor of the control room. Then it began to increase in density until apparently a man stood before them. His skin, like that of all the inhabitants of the planets of the green suns, was green. He was tall and well-proportioned when judged by earthly standards, except for his head, which was overly large, and which was particularly massive above the eyes and backward from the ears. He was evidently of great age, for what little of his face was visible was seamed and wrinkled, and his long, thick mane of hair and his square-cut, yard-long beard were a dazzling white, only faintly tinged with green. The figure before them was not transparent, but it was clear that it was not made of flesh and blood. He looked at each of the four humans intently before pointing at the table where the mechanical educator stood. Rizzo placed it in front of the visitor and put on a headset, handing one to the stranger. The visitor stared at him, conveying that he was to learn English. Rizzo pressed a lever and felt a profound and untroubled serenity as the projection spoke. "Greetings, Dr. Rizzo, Mr. Crane, and ladies. Welcome to Norlamin, the planet you are currently flying towards. We have been waiting for you for over 5,000 years. It was a mathematical certainty that someone from outside our solar system would come to us with Rovalon, the metal of power. We have been searching for the vibrations that would signal the arrival of the user of that metal. Now that you have come, I see that you have vast stores of it. As seekers of truth, you will share it with us gladly, and we will teach you many things you wish to know. Allow me to operate the educator so I can reveal my mind to yours." The visitor proceeded to make minor alterations to the educator, using visible streams of force to transform it into an entirely different mechanism. Rizzo was amazed and asked, "What are you?" "I am Orlon, the first of astronomy of Norlamin, in my observatory on the planet's surface. This is simply my projection, composed of forces for which you have no name in your language. You can cut it off if you wish, but your ray screens are of a surprisingly high order of efficiency. Please put on the remodeled headsets, all four of you." As they put on the headsets, the rays of force moved the dials and switches with greater speed and precision than human hands could have managed. Each brain received a clear understanding of the customs, language, and manners of the inhabitants of Norlamin. They felt a vast, immeasurable peace, calm power, and a depth and breadth of mental vision that they had never experienced before. Looking deep into their minds, the visitors sensed a quiet, placid certainty, beheld power and knowledge that was limitless, and perceived depths of wisdom that were unfathomable. Smoothly, a stream of cosmic comprehension flowed from his mind into theirs. They saw infinitesimally small units grouping into planetary formations to form practically dimensionless particles. These particles, in turn, formed slightly larger ones, and after a long succession of such grouping, they understood that the comparatively gigantic aggregates which then held their attention were electrons and protons, the smallest units recognized by earthly science. They clearly comprehended the combination of these electrons and protons into atoms. They perceived the way in which atoms build up molecules and comprehended the molecular structure of matter. The fundamental laws of physics, electricity, gravitation, and chemistry were laid before them in mathematical thoughts, only dimly grasped even by Rizzo and Crane. They saw globular aggregations of matter, the suns and their planets, comprising solar systems. They saw solar systems, in accordance with those immutable laws, grouped into galaxies. Galaxies in turn, suddenly the flow was shut off as though a valve had been closed, and the astronomer spoke. Your brains should be stored only with the material you desire most and can use to the best advantage, for your mental capacity is even more limited than my own. Please understand that I speak in no derogatory sense. It is only that your race has many thousands of generations to go before your minds should be stored with knowledge indiscriminately. We ourselves have not yet reached that stage, and we are perhaps millions of years older than you. And yet, he continued musingly, I envy you. Knowledge is, of course, relative, and I can know so little. Time and space have yielded not an iota of their mystery to our most penetrant minds. And whether we delve baffled into the unknown smallness of the small, or whether we peer, blind and helpless, into the unknown largeness of the large, it is the same. Infinity is comprehensible only to the infinite one, the all, shaping force directing and controlling the universe and the unknowable sphere. The more we know, the vaster the virgin fields of investigation open to us, and the more infinitesimal becomes our knowledge. But I am perhaps keeping you from more important activities. As you approach Norlamin more nearly, I shall guide you to my observatory. I am glad indeed that it is in my lifetime that you have come to us, and I await anxiously the opportunity of greeting you in the flesh. The years remaining to me of this cycle of existence are few, and I had almost ceased hoping to witness your coming. The projection vanished instantaneously, and the four stared at each other in an incredulous daze of astonishment. Rizzo finally broke the stunned silence. "Well, I'll be kicked to death by little red spiders," he exclaimed. "Mart, did you see what I saw, or did I get high on something without knowing it? That sure burned me up. It breaks me right off at the ankles, just to think of it." Crane walked to the educator in silence. He examined it, felt the changed coils and transformers, and gently shook the new insulating base of the great power tube. Silently, he turned away from the instrument panel, walked around it, checked the meters, and then went back to inspect the educator. It was real, not just an advanced form of hypnosis like I initially thought, he reported seriously. Hypnosis, if advanced enough, could have affected us in that way, even to the point of teaching us a strange language, but it couldn't have had that effect on copper, tartan, bakelite and glass. It was definitely real, and while I can't begin to understand it, I will say that your imagination has certainly been vindicated. A race of beings who can do such things can do almost anything. You were right from the beginning. "Then you can beat those horrible Fenachrone after all!" exclaimed Dorothy, throwing herself into her husband's arms. "Do you remember, Dick, when I called you Columbus at San Salvador?" asked Margaret, unsteady in Crane's embrace. "What do you call a man who, from the depths of his imagination, brings forth the means to save the civilization of millions of worlds from destruction?" "Don't talk like that, please, folks," Rizzo said, clearly uncomfortable. He blushed intensely, the burning red tide rising in waves up to his hair as he wriggled in embarrassment, like any schoolboy. "Mart did most of it anyway, you know, and even then, we're not out of the woods yet, not by a long shot." "You will admit, won't you, that we can see our way out of the woods at least, and that you yourself feel rather relieved?" asked Crane. "I think we'll be able to pull their corks now, all right, after we get some information. It's a cinch they either have the stuff we need or know how to get it, and if that zone is impenetrable, I'll bet they'll be able to figure out something just as good." "Relieved? That doesn't even begin to describe it, Guy. I feel like I just got the old man of the sea off my back. What do you say, girls? Why don't you get your fiddle and guitar, and we'll sing a little song? I feel kind of relieved. They had me worried for a bit. It's the first time I've felt like singing since we took down that warship." Dorothy brought out her fiddle, the magnificent Stradivarius that Crane had given her, and Margaret brought out her guitar, and they sang one rollicking number after another. Though they were by no means a quartet from the Metropolitan Opera, their voices were all better than mediocre, and they had sung together so much that they harmonized readily. "Why don't you play us some real music, Dottie?" asked Margaret after a while. "You haven't practiced in ages." "I haven't felt like playing lately, but I do now," said Dorothy, standing up and sweeping the bow over the strings. A doctor of music in violin and an accomplished musician playing one of the finest instruments in the world, she was lifted out of herself by the relief from the dread of the Fenachrone invasion, and that splendid violin expressed every subtle nuance of her thought. She played rhapsodies and paeans and solos by the great masters. She danced energetically, performing vivacious moves before switching to the more subdued melodies of Traumerei and Liebestraum. Finally, she transitioned to the timeless classic Meditation, and as the last note faded away, Rizzo extended his arms. "You're a force to be reckoned with, Dotty Dimple, and I am enamored with you," he proclaimed. His eyes and arms conveyed a depth of feeling that his words alone could not express. The four travellers peered at Norlamin, its image occupying almost the entirety of the sixth visiplate. Though partially obscured by clouds and featuring two glaring caps of snow at its poles, the planet would soon turn green as it moved inside the orbit of its sun within the vast central luminary of its complex solar system. It was a magnificent sight, with sparkling blue oceans and unfamiliar green continents of varying shapes. The velocity of their space cruiser was so great that the image grew larger as they watched, eventually exceeding the visiplate's capacity. "Orlon should be appearing any moment now," Rizzo predicted, and shortly thereafter, the astronomer's projection materialized in the control room. "Greetings, terrestrials," he exclaimed. "With your permission, I will guide your flight." The travelers assented, and Orlon floated over to the control board. He focused a beam of force on the visiplate, altering the direction of the bar slightly and reducing their negative acceleration. He also directed another beam of force at the steering mechanism. "We will land at my observatory on Norlamin in 7,428 seconds, he announced. "We will arrive on the dark side of the planet, but I have already set a force to guide us on the necessary curved path. I will stay with you until we land, and we can discuss any topic of interest to you." "We have a very interesting topic indeed, which is why we came all this way," Rizzo replied. "But it would take too long to explain. I'll show you instead." He produced a magnetic brain record, inserted it into the machine, and handed Orlon a headset. The astronomer put it on, activated the lever, and for an hour there was complete silence as the two brilliant minds studied the monstrous brain of the menace. The magnetic tape never paused or repeated, and Orlon's brain absorbed the information as quickly as it was transmitted, comprehending every aspect of the terrifying mind. As the tape reached its end and the dreadful record concluded, a shadow passed over Orlon's face. "It is a truly depraved evolution," he lamented. "It is sad to contemplate such a perversion of an otherwise excellent brain. They possess power, much like you do, and they have a desire to destroy, which I cannot fathom. Nevertheless, if it is written in the sphere that we must pass through, it means only that we will continue our search on the next plane, hopefully with better tools and greater understanding than we currently possess." "What's wrong?" Rizzo inquired gravely. "Are we just going to let them win without a fight? What can we do? Violence goes against our nature as Norlaminians. We can only offer passive resistance. But there is something we can do, if we put our minds to it. Put on that headset again, and let me share my battle plan with you. Offer any suggestions you may have with your superior intellect." As the human scientist shared his plan with the astronomer, Orlon's face lit up. "It is written in the sphere that the Fenachrone will pass," he said. "What you ask of us we can do. I may only have a basic knowledge of rays, as it is not my family's specialty, but Rovol of the Rovol family of rays has all the present knowledge of such phenomena. Tomorrow I will bring you together, and with the help of your metal of power, I have no doubt that he will be able to solve your problem." Dorothy was confused. "I don't understand how a whole family can study one subject, but only have one student in it." Orlon explained, "Every Norlaminian is a student, and most of us are students of science. For us, labor means mental effort or study. We do not perform physical labor as all our mechanical work is done by forces. Because of this, specialization became necessary to avoid duplication of effort and ensure complete coverage of the field. Each man is assigned to a small subdivision of scientific endeavor to study it intensively. When he becomes old, he chooses a successor, usually a son, and transfers his knowledge to the younger student. He also records his own brain, similar to how you have recorded the Fenachrone's brain on your metallic tape. These records are stored in a central library as permanent references. Thanks to this system, a young Norlaminian only needs to finish an elementary education, which takes about 25, 30 years before they are ready to begin actual work. When the time comes, one will receive all the knowledge of their specialty in a single day, accumulated by their predecessors over thousands of years of intensive study, Rizzo exclaimed in awe. No wonder you all know so much. As an astronomer, perhaps you would be interested in this star chart and related information, or do you already possess this knowledge? The Fenachrone are far ahead of us in that subject due to their observatories in open space and gigantic reflectors, which cannot be used through any atmosphere. We are further hindered by only having darkness for a few hours at a time, and only in the winter when our planet is outside the orbit of our sun, around the central sun of our entire system. However, with the Rovolon you have brought us, we will have real observatories far out in space. I will personally be indebted to you more than I can express. As for the chart, I hope to examine it while you are conferring with Rovol of Rays. How many families are working on rays? Just one, Rizzo asked. There is one family for each kind of ray. Each family knows a great deal about all kinds of vibrations of the ether, but specializes in one narrow field. For example, the rays you are interested in, those that can penetrate a zone of force, would be a ray of the fifth order. These rays are very new and have only been under investigation for a few hundred years. The Rovol is the only student who is well informed about them. Shall I explain the orders of rays more fully than I did with the educator? Yes, please. You assumed we knew more than we do, so a little explanation would be helpful. All ordinary vibrations, such as light, heat, electricity, radio, and the like, are arbitrarily called waves of the first order. This is to distinguish them from waves of the second order, which are given off by particles of the second order, such as protons and electrons, when they combine to form atoms. Your scientist Millikan discovered these rays, which you call Millikan or cosmic rays. Later, when subelectrons were identified, the rays given off by their combination into electrons or by the disruption of electrons were called rays of the third order. These rays are most interesting and useful, as they do all our mechanical work. As a class, they are called protelectricity and bear the same relation to ordinary electricity that electricity does to torque. Both are pure energy and are interconvertible. In contrast to electricity, protelectricity can be transformed into various forms by fields of force, similar to how white light is separated into different colors by a prism. It's more comparable to how alternating current is converted to direct current by a motor generator set, which results in changes in properties. There are over 500 distinct factors in the complete spectrum, each as unique as the difference between red and green. Particles of the fourth order generate rays of the fourth order, and those of the fifth order produce rays of the fifth order. Fourth-order rays have been researched extensively, but only theoretically and mathematically, as they have an extremely short wavelength and can only be generated by breaking down matter into corresponding particles. However, they behave similarly to protelectricity. Thus, the power that propels your spacecraft, your attractors, your repellers, your object compass, and your zone of force are just a few of the many hundreds of wavebands of the fourth order, which you would have figured out in time. The rays of the fifth order are not well understood, even theoretically, although their existence has been demonstrated. For someone with no knowledge, you seem to know a lot about rays. What about the fifth order? Is that the highest order? My knowledge is limited and general, only enough to understand my subject. The fifth order is not the end. It is likely just the beginning. We now believe that the orders extend infinitely small, just as galaxies are grouped into larger aggregations, which are probably tiny units in an infinitely large scheme. Over 6,000 years ago, the last third-order rays were discovered. Certain peculiarities in their behavior led the Rovol of that time to suspect the existence of the fourth order. Successive generations of the Rovol proved their existence, determined the conditions for their release, and found that this power metal was the only catalyst capable of decomposing matter and releasing the rays. This metal, named Rovolon after the Rovol, was first described theoretically and later found by spectroscopy in certain stars, notably in one star only 8 light-years away, but not even a trace of it exists in our solar system. Since these discoveries, the Rovol have been perfecting the theory of the Fourth Order, beginning that of the Fifth, and waiting for your arrival. The current Rovol, like myself and many others whose work is almost at a standstill, is eagerly awaiting your arrival as soon as the Bismarck can be landed on our planet. Your rockets or projections couldn't locate any Rovolon? No. Every 100 years or so, someone develops a new type of rocket that they believe has a slight chance of making the journey, but none of these venturesome youths has returned yet. It is possible that the sun in question has no planets, or that our spacecrafts have failed. Our predictions are useless, as they can only be sent a short distance using our current carrier wave. If we had a carrier of the Fifth Order, we could send a projection to any point in the galaxy, since its speed would be millions of times faster than light, and the power required would be reduced accordingly. However, as I have mentioned before, such waves cannot be generated without the metal Rovolon. I hate to interrupt, but we need to land soon, and it seems like it will be a rough landing, said one of the passengers. We will land soon, and it will be a smooth landing, replied Orlon confidently. The Bismarck was descending rapidly, but the landing was so precise that the passengers only felt a slight decrease in acceleration when they touched the ground. Orlon said, "I will join you in person very shortly," and the projection disappeared. "We are on a new world," said Rizzo. "It's not as exciting as the first one, is it?" Crane asked. "What is the air composition, density, gravity, temperature, and so on? Should we conduct some tests?" "Didn't you get that information on the educator? Gravity is a little less than 7/10. Air composition is the same as Osnome and Dasor. Pressure is halfway between Earth and Osnome. Temperature is similar to Osnome most of the time, but it's fairly comfortable in the winter. There is snow at the poles, but this observatory is only 10 degrees from the equator. They don't wear many clothes here, except when they have to. Let's go," said Rizzo. He opened the door, and the four travelers stepped out onto a well-manicured lawn. The turf was so soft and blue-green that it would put an oriental rug to shame. The landscape was illuminated by a soft, mellow, yet intense green light that seemed to come from nowhere. The Bismarck had landed in the center of a circular enclosure that was 100 yards in diameter. The enclosure was surrounded by rows of shrubbery, statues, and fountains, all bathed in ever-changing waves of light. The circle was only broken at one point, where a lane led up to the cream and green marble structure with its enormous glassy dome, the observatory of Orlon. The astronomer welcomed the terrestrials to Norlamin with a deep, calm voice. Orlon greeted them in the American fashion and gave each of them a crystal chain with a small Norlaminian chronometer radiophone. 4 other old men stood behind him, including Fodan, chief of the 5 of Norlamin, Rovol, Astron, the first of energy, and Satrazon, the first of chemistry. Orlon walked with Rizzo and the party toward the observatory. The Earth people were amazed by the unearthly beauty of the grounds. The hedge of shrubbery was meticulously groomed into a fantastic geometrical scheme. The statues of heroic size were of men and women, busts and groups in natural or allegorical poses. The fountains were magnificent bronze and glass groups of the strange aquatic denizens of the planet, bathed in geometrically shaped sprays, screens, and columns of water. The wall between the statues and fountains was moving and scintillating, with torrents of color and harmoniously blended light. As they entered the lane, Rizzo saw with amazement that what he had thought was a wall was not a wall at all. It was composed of myriads of individual sparkling jewels, of every known color, for the most part self-luminous. Each gem was weaving and darting here and there, flying at headlong speed along an extremely tortuous but evidently carefully calculated course. Dorothy whispered to Rizzo, asking what the moving wall was. Rizzo asked Orlon to explain it. Orlon said that the garden had been the private retreat of the family of Orlon for many thousands of years, and women of their house had been beautifying it since its inception. The statuary was very old, and modern art had developed along the lines of color and motion, hence the lighting effects and the tapestry wall. Each precious stone is suspended at the end of a tiny beam of energy, and a machine controls all the beams with a key for each gem on the wall. Crane, the methodical, gazed at the countless sparkling jewels and asked, "It must have taken an enormous amount of time to complete such a project?" "It is far from finished. In fact, it has barely begun. It was started only about 400 years ago," replied the Orlon. 400 years! Exclaimed Dorothy. "Do you live that long? How long will it take to finish it, and what will it look like when it's done?" "No, none of us live longer than about 160 years. At that age, most of us choose to pass. When this tapestry wall is completed, it will not just be form and color as it is now. It will depict the history of Norlamin from the planet's first cooling. It will likely take thousands of years to finish. You see, time is of little importance to us, and craftsmanship is everything. My companion will continue working on it until we decide to pass. My son's companion may continue it. In any case, many generations of Orlon women will work on it until it is complete. When it is finished, it will be a thing of beauty as long as Norlamin endures." "But what if your son's partner isn't that kind of artist? What if she wants to do music or painting or something else?" asked Dorothy curiously. "That is quite possible, for fortunately, our art is not yet entirely intellectual, as is our music. There are many unfinished artistic projects in the House of Orlon, and if my son's partner does not find one to her liking, she will be free to continue anything else she has begun or start an entirely new project of her own." "Do you have a family, then?" asked Margaret. "I'm afraid I didn't understand everything when you transmitted it to us through the educator." "I sent things too quickly for you, not realizing that your educator was new to you, something with which you were not entirely familiar. Therefore, I will explain some things in words, since you are not familiar with the mechanism of thought transfer. The Five, a self-perpetuating body, govern the entire planet as necessary. Their decrees are based on self-evident truth and therefore are the law. Population is regulated according to the planet's needs, and since much work is in progress, an increase in population was recommended by the Five. My companion and I had 3 children instead of the usual 2. By chance, we had 2 boys and 1 girl. One of the boys will take on my duties when I pass, and the other will take over a branch of science that has grown too complex for one person to handle as a specialist should. As a science fiction author, I present to you a world where the most perfect children are born of parents in the full prime of mental life at the age of 100 years. Each generation covers 100 years, and the first 25 years of a child's life are spent at home with their parents, during which time they acquire their elementary education in the common schools. Then, boys and girls alike move to the country of youth, where they spend another 25 years. There, they develop their brains and initiative by conducting any researches they choose. Most of us at that age solve all the riddles of the universe, only to discover later that our solutions have been fallacious. However, much really excellent work is done in the country of youth, primarily because of the new and unprejudiced viewpoints of the virgin minds there at work. In that country also, each finds their life's companion, the one necessary to round out mere existence into a perfection of living that no person, man or woman, can ever know alone. At 50 years of age, the man, now mentally mature, is recalled to his family home, as his father's brain is now losing some of its vigor and keenness. The father then turns over his work to the son by means of the educator, and when the weight of the accumulated knowledge of 100,000 generations of research is impressed upon the son's brain, his play is over. "What does the father do then?" asked Dorothy. "Having made his brain record, about which I have told you, he and his companion, for she has in similar fashion turned over her work to her successor, retire to the country of age, where they rest and relax after their century of effort. They do whatever they care to do, for as long as they please to do it. Finally, after assuring themselves that all is well with the children, they decide that they are ready for the change. Then, side by side as they have labored, they pass." Now at the door of the observatory, Dorothy paused and shrank back against Rizzo, her eyes widening as she stared at Orlon. "No, daughter, why should we fear the change?" He answered her unspoken question, calm serenity in every inflection of his quiet voice. "The life principle is unknowable to the finite mind, as is the all-controlling force. Despite our lack of understanding of its ultimate purpose, anyone ready for the change can release the life principle, allowing for unhindered progress." In a large room at the observatory, Rizzo stood up and reached for his wife's hand. "I think we're done here, Orlon. We've been up for 30 hours, and that's a long time for us. I'm too tired to think straight. We should head back to the Bismarck and get some sleep. After I've rested for 9 hours or so, I'll go to Rovold's lab, and Crane can stay here with you." "You don't have to go back to your ship," Orlon said. "I know it's cramped. We've arranged living quarters for you here. Let's have a meal together, and then we'll rest and meet again tomorrow." As he spoke, trays of delicious food appeared in front of each person. Rizzo sat down, and the tray followed him, always in the most convenient position. Crane looked at Rizzo, and Satrazon, the first of chemistry, answered his unspoken question. "The food in front of you is safe for you to eat. It doesn't contain any copper, arsenic, or heavy metals. It's balanced with carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and sugars, and has all the necessary nutritional factors. You'll find the flavors agreeable." "Synthetic, huh? You've got us figured out," Rizzo said, as he cut into the thick, rare, and beautifully broiled steak on his tray, noticing that the Norlaminians used different utensils than their earthly guests. "Completely synthetic," Satrazon replied, "except for the necessary sodium chloride. As you know, sodium and chlorine are rare in our system, so we took the amount we needed from your ship's supply. We can't synthesize atoms because of the lack of Rovolon, but now that we have it, my science can progress as it should. Thank you for your help." "We should be thanking you," Rizzo said. "We've done very little compared to what you're doing for us, but you speak of the force on the food supply as if you didn't oversee its preparation. Did you not create these meats and vegetables yourself?" "No, I just analyzed your tissues, surveyed your food supply, and set up the necessary integrals in the mechanism," Satrazon replied. "The forces at work will continue to operate as long as you remain on this planet," said Dorothy, taking a bite of the fruit salad. "This dish is divine, unlike any other fruit I've ever tasted. It must be the same ambrosia that the old pagan gods used to eat." Crane asked, "If all you did was set up the integrals, how do you know what the next meal will be?" The answer surprised him. "We have no idea what the form, flavor, or consistency of any dish will be. We only know that the flavor will be agreeable and that it will match the form and consistency of the substance. The composition will be well balanced chemically. You see, a device similar to your kaleidoscope controls all the details of flavor, form, texture, and so on. The integrals prevent any unwholesome, unpleasant, or unbalanced combination of any nature. Everything else is left to the mechanism, which operates on pure chance." Rizzo chimed in, "Some system, I must say," and the group resumed their attack on the long-delayed supper. After the meal, the earthly visitors were shown to their rooms and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep.